The budget reconciliation is in full swing now since we are post Labor Day. In fact, the Ways and Means Committee had a hearing today. The transcript, I believe, is out online. It's not in the most cogent order, I will warn everybody, but it is up there on their website. This slide, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. This was mostly constructed for the event that we're doing on the 23rd, but this is a basic description of what reconciliation is. It is a budget process that allows the Congress to pass legislation getting around a filibuster with an expedited procedure. So in the Senate, that means that it limits the number of hours of debate. You also have the Byrd rule, which means that any amendments have to be germane to the reconciliation bill. They have to not add to the deficit. And it also in the House means that when they passed reconciliation and in the House about a week ago, it sent instructions to the committees to start marking up parts of the bill. Each committee is allotted a certain dollar amount. So that's what they're doing right now. So they are marking up and basically writing recommendations to change existing budgetary law that will go to the Budget Committee. And the Budget Committee will assemble all of those pieces. That will become the overall reconciliation bill that will go to the House floor for a vote. So that's kind of what this slide is meant to depict. This is where we are right now. We're in the process of having the committees work it up. All right, and this, yes, sure.
So when you say that the committees mark it up, does that mean that instead of going one committee at a time serially and taking more time, does each committee just mark up their section and they are doing it simultaneously?
Pretty much, and that's what this is from the actual House's Progressive Caucus website.
Thank you.
This is the schedule for these hearings in these committees where they are going to be marking up the bill. And if you look down the list, they are all in a very compact schedule. Now, part of that is because there was disagreement about reconciliation, about the proposed package in the House. 10 members led by Representative Gottheimer from New Jersey kind of revolted. The leadership dragged everybody into a meeting and said, okay, we're just going to vote on the top line amount for the budget. We're going to figure out the details later. We're just going to vote that we're going to do this by reconciliation and that the overall cost of the reconciliation bill will be 3.5 trillion. So they also, in order to get everybody to agree to this, guaranteed to those moderates that they would get a vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill by the 27th. So that vote will definitely happen on the 27th. For some of them in that group, their main objection was not so much to the reconciliation bill, it was to a fear that the infrastructure bill would not get a vote and they would have to vote on a budget that was a little more of a risky vote. So if you look at the schedule, most of these committees are going to be holding hearings and marking up the bills on the same days. We're talking about between the 9th and the 14th of September. So that's why it's such an urgent call to action to call your members now. Particularly for healthcare, you're looking at the Ways and Means Committee. That's the committee that will in the House be writing, the healthcare aspects of this bill. What we're looking at in the bill, as the New York Times said, this could be the most significant expansion of the national safety net since the war on poverty in the 1960s. So right now, what looks to be included in the bill is an expansion of Medicare to include vision, hearing, and dental, allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Although the one ask that I think that we should do next week should be specifically about this issue, because they're talking about using the standard for domestic drug prices and not international drug prices. And we really want them to use the international standard. They're also debating caps on patient out-of-pocket costs. That language is yet to really be finalized and written, although there was 5 pages from, I believe, Senator Wyden's office that leaked out last Friday. And I have the links to that information. I'll share that all with you. They are also looking at closing the Medicaid gap, the gap in coverage for the states where states did not adequately expand Medicaid. There, the real dividing line seems to be that more conservative leaning members want it to be temporary with a sunset date, while other members in the Black and Latino caucus want it to be a permanent fix.
And
And
sorry, can you repeat what right now you're talking about Medicaid or Medicare?
Medicaid, they wanted a fix to the Medicaid funding gap. They actually wanted the federal government to come in and fill the hole left by states that refuse to expand Medicaid. But there's a debate about making that permanent.
Thank you.
Yep, sure. And then less controversially, finally, there's funding for senior community-based care programs that in particular was something that was really being pushed by our state senator, Bob Casey, and he's really gotten behind that. So that I think probably will stay in the bill. So our call to action or ask is that we want you to call your member of Congress. So kind of taking a page from Indivisible, which was where I did initially a lot of training, and I think they do great work. Calls, postcards, letters to the editor on these issues, particularly in your local newspaper, really have an impact. So they always used to tell us in those trainings, you want your calls in particular to have one ask, one question. Don't call them with like 6 different things. You'll just overload them and they won't really address all of your issues. It's just too much. Also find out who you're, oh yes, buddy.
So when you say one question per call, do you mean one topic per call, or are you supposed to like think of a question? Like rather than saying, I want you to vote for this bill with these things in it, you supposed to say, is the senator going to be voting for this bill? Or what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, like I would call and phrase it like, my calls have been, hi, my name is Kristin. I'm a constituent in, I'm not in Matt Cartwright's district. I'm in Susan Wild's district, but I'll use Matt Cartwright. I'm a constituent in Matt Cartwright's district. I'd like to thank the congressman for being such a staunch advocate for healthcare for seniors. I really want to know what's his position on the provisions in the reconciliation budget bill, and then I'll list them. But my main question is, what's his position on the reconciliation budget bill healthcare provisions? I know that's a broad, vague question, but I'm going with a broad question at this point, just because I want to get them on the record. They're not really publicly talking to the press other than the leak of that 5-page letter. But anything that they tell a constituent is public knowledge. Just as a FYI, if they tell you something, it's public knowledge.
Oh, okay.
Yep, check.
So go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, just real quick. Is there any discussion about language revolving around state-based universal health care at this point? Is that in the mix?
I had heard that from a couple of people, but I haven't seen anything yet. I did send an email to Jeff Garris. It's a 99% campaign, because they've been sending out updates on the reconciliation. So I'll circle back to him and ask that question. My question to him initially was, is the ability to lower the age or to even buy into Medicare, is that just completely out of the bill? And for all intents and purposes, it looks like it's out of the bill. There's already some backtracking that members of the caucus are concerned that the price tag is too high, and that like in 2010, they're going to pay a price at the ballot box in an election year from angry constituents screaming about the deficit. Mm-hmm. And it looks like healthcare is one of the places where they're looking to trim that back. Although the Ways and Means hearing today, most of the Republican rebuttal was around the provisions around retirement plans, not really healthcare.
So on the slide before this, when you had
Yes.
4 different provisions listed,
Mhm.
the last one isn't one that I've heard really spoken about with regard to this reconciliation bill, but I have been hearing about having, having the eligibility age reduced down to either 55 or 60. But you don't have that on here. And then there was the single payer for state-based that I think Chuck
Yeah.
already brought up. But so this number 4 is funding for senior community-based care programs.
Mhm. That came from Casey's office, and basically he had asked for inclusion of language that would facilitate or support seniors staying in their homes and accessing services that they would normally access through a nursing home facility from home.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that actually, so I went to, Sanders had town hall meetings in Vermont this past weekend, Labor Day weekend, in 5 different towns. And I went to the one in my town, and because I live in a big city with 7,000 people, so so we had one in our town, and that he did mention that. He mentioned the vision, hearing, and dental. He mentioned the negotiating of drug prices, and he mentioned the funding of senior community-based care programs in his talk then. But he didn't mention the cap for out-of-pocket costs, and he did not mention lowering the eligibility age when he spoke to the public that day. Now, of course, what he's trying to not say things that then don't end up happening, and then he's like, "Oh, you told us you would do this," and it's not. We never got it. So when he was explaining things, I think he was including things that he thought had a higher probability of going through.
Yeah. At least my understanding, and I asked for clarification from Jeff, but my understanding is that it looks like lowering the age is out.
Okay.
The out-of-pocket caps, I think, has a better chance of staying in, but I don't think the age we will get.
Okay, so I would say when people are writing, if you it looks like the dental, vision, and hearing will probably be in it from what I've been hearing, and it's a bipartisan thing to want to negotiate the drug prices. But the reality is that those are so important and have enough support that they might happen later. To me, the really important thing that really keeps insurance companies involved in our Medicare is that there is no cap on the traditional Medicare, so that you kind of are forced to buy a private product for supplemental unless you're just willing to say, yeah, if it's more than I can afford, I just will die, and some people do make that decision. But it really ties us to having, insurance companies involved in our traditional Medicare program. And we would like to have the program be good enough that you could just do Medicare. Chuck, you have your hand up?
I was just, I just to get clarification, I heard that Joe Manchin has put a marker down at $1 trillion.
Yeah, I think
his negotiating position is to drag this thing as far backwards as possible.
And I think that's why our calls and our letters and postcards and letters to the editor are so important here, because to Chuck's point, to Betty's point, if you don't get a good provision about negotiating drug prices, then that drastically limits how much you can expand coverage for vision, hearing, and dental, or you can cap out-of-pocket expenses. All of those 3 travel together. You can't really separate them. Oh, Betty?
No, I
didn't
didn't.
manage 2 things, but you probably said this already. Is there, when is the deadline? When is this actually either going to be decided, yay or nay?
So what'll happen, to take you back here, is Ways and Means, which will handle the healthcare part of this. They had their first hearing today. They'll have their last hearing on the 14th. It will probably come out of committee around I'm guessing the 14th. Then it will go to the budget committee. The budget committee will take the markups from every one of these committees and put them together. Now, budget cannot substantively change what the committees mark up. And they can allow amendments, but they have to be recommended by the chair of the budget committee. So it's pretty much, if there's an amendment that comes to the House floor, when the bill comes to the floor at the end, that's an indication of what the leadership wants. The bill is probably going to come up for a floor vote. I would say it would have to come up at the latest the 27th, because infrastructure is scheduled for a vote that day. And funding for infrastructure runs out on October 1st. Dr. Bell, you had a question?
Well, I was going to add, and this is a really good analysis, especially of the process, which I always find befuddling. I am not a procedure wonk by any means. So thank you, Kristin, really elucidating. But in terms of the negotiations going on right now, and they are going on right now as we speak, they are battling this out. You know what I'm hearing, and that number that I think it was Chuck who threw out the I don't know who said 1 trillion, that Manchin is trying to keep this to 1 trillion, is so disturbing, you know, from the point of view not just of healthcare, obviously, from especially climate. I mean, we're talking about like we need at least 10 or 12 trillion just to get ourselves out of the mess, you know, to put into place some kind of effective climate mitigation. And that 3.5 trillion is already such an incredible concession, you know. So, and we know that Medicare for All will save all the money. Like there's no, you know, pay for involved in Medicare for All because it saves all that money. The kind of conventional wisdom around this in terms of the reconciliation has been that the Medicare drug price negotiation is where they'll get the immediate savings to offset the costs of adding dental, vision, and hearing. And so that can't be compromised by, you know, say, like you said, Kristin, the domestic versus international drug prices, or limiting the number of drugs that can be negotiated, or, you know, any of those kind of circumstances. I mean, once you compromise on the ability of Medicare to negotiate, you know, I guess you could put it at a standard like the VA, for example. If you know, if Medicare was able to negotiate at the same kind of standards as the VA, and then all those savings, you know, would pay for the rest of the asks, including, as my understanding, the lowering the eligibility age as well for healthcare. So so I think it's still appropriate to ask for lowering Medicare eligibility age, and also it makes sense from a negotiation standpoint that we, as, you know, advocates, we want Medicare for all, and as far as we're concerned, the first step toward that is to lower eligibility age, and then to expand benefits as well, and recognize that negotiating drug prices is a tool in which to do that. And if I were, you know, Pramila Jayapal, I wouldn't give Manchin just 1 inch at all in that negotiation, frankly.
So thank you, Dr. Bill.
There is also in here, if you get into the slide deck, you will see notes at the bottom, and you will see links. For example, here is the link to the Ways and Means Committee. This has every member who's on the committee.
Great.
And it has their email and their phone number. And then over here, when you call them, you can check what their position